The moment I realized I did not belong was not when someone insulted me. It was when everyone else received a Christmas gift except me. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in fresh snow and glowing lights. The Walker family gathered at Margaret's house every year without fail. It was one of those traditions that seemed older than anyone could remember. The same oversized tree stood beside the fireplace. The same holiday music played softly through hidden speakers. The same homemade cinnamon rolls filled the kitchen with their familiar scent. From the outside, everything looked warm and perfect. Inside, I was about to experience one of the most painful moments of my life. My name is Emily Walker. I am 41 years old. I have been married to David for 17 years. Together we have a 16-year-old daughter named Lily. For most of those 17 years, I convinced myself that my relationship with my mother-in-law was improving. Maybe not close, maybe not affectionate, but improving. At least that was what I wanted to believe. That Christmas morning, I arrived carrying 2 homemade pies and a tray of cookies I had spent most of the previous evening baking. Snow covered the front yard. The windows glowed with holiday lights. Through the glass, I could already see family members gathered around the tree. David carried the gifts we had brought while Lily practically ran inside, excited to see her cousins. I followed behind them with a smile. At first, everything felt normal. People hugged. Children laughed. Coffee cups circulated through the living room. Christmas music drifted through the house. Margaret stood near the fireplace wearing a bright red sweater and greeting everyone with the confidence of someone hosting her favorite event of the year. When she saw me, she smiled politely. "Merry Christmas, Emily." "Merry Christmas," I replied. The exchange lasted only seconds. Nothing seemed unusual. An hour later, everyone gathered around the tree for the annual gift exchange. This was Margaret's favorite tradition. She always insisted on personally handing each gift to its recipient. The grandchildren sat cross-legged on the floor. Adults found seats around the room. Wrapping paper already littered the carpet from earlier presents. The atmosphere felt joyful and familiar. Margaret picked up the first package and called out a name. Then another. And another. One by one, gifts moved through the room. Every family member received something. My father-in-law received a new fishing jacket. David received a leather travel bag. Lily received a necklace she immediately loved. Cousins opened sweaters, books, kitchen gadgets, and gift cards. Laughter followed each surprise. I smiled along with everyone else. At first, I did not notice anything strange. Then I realized Margaret was reaching the bottom of the pile. I glanced beneath the tree. Only a few packages remained. None carried my name. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe mine was hidden behind something larger. Maybe it had been misplaced. Maybe I was imagining things. Margaret handed out another gift. Then another. Finally, the last package disappeared from beneath the tree. The room remained cheerful. People admired their presents. Conversations filled the air. Nobody seemed to notice what I had just noticed. I looked beneath the tree again. Nothing. Not a single package remained. My chest tightened. Surely there had been some mistake. I waited for Margaret to say something. Perhaps she would laugh and reveal a forgotten gift. Perhaps she would apologize for leaving it in another room. Instead, she simply sat down and began discussing everyone's presents as though nothing unusual had happened. I counted the recipients in my head. My father-in-law, David, Lily, the cousins, the aunts, the uncles. Even a neighbor who stopped by every Christmas morning had received something. Everyone except me. For a moment, I wondered whether I should say something. Then I looked around the room. Nobody else seemed aware of what had happened. Or perhaps they were aware and simply uncomfortable. I could not tell. So I smiled. I nodded during conversations. I pretended everything was fine. Inside, however, a different feeling was growing. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to realization. Because the longer I sat there, the harder it became to believe this was an accident. Margaret planned Christmas for months. She made lists, organized purchases, wrapped gifts with color-coded ribbons. Nothing about her holiday preparations was random. If I did not have a gift under that tree, there was a reason. Across the room, Lily looked up from her new necklace and met my eyes. For a brief moment, her smile faded. Then she glanced beneath the tree. then back at me. A small crease appeared on her forehead. She had noticed it too. And somehow that worried me more than being forgotten. Because if my 16-year-old daughter could see what happened, then perhaps this was not a misunderstanding after all. Perhaps it was exactly what it looked like. For the next hour, I did what many people do when they are hurt in public. I pretended I was not hurt at all. The living room remained full of laughter and conversation. Children showed off their new gifts. Relatives compared presents and shared stories from previous Christmases. Holiday music continued playing softly in the background. Anyone looking at me would have assumed I was enjoying the morning just like everyone else. I smiled when people spoke to me. I complimented gifts. I helped refill coffee cups. I even carried extra wrapping paper to the trash. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong. Inside, however, I could not stop replaying the scene beneath the tree. Every time I looked around the room, I noticed another reminder. David testing the new travel bag his mother bought him. Lily admiring her necklace. My father-in-law trying on his fishing jacket. Everywhere I looked, there was evidence that Margaret had thought carefully about everyone. Everyone except me. Around noon, the family gathered in the dining room for lunch. The long table was covered with holiday dishes. Ham, roasted vegetables, dinner rolls, and homemade desserts filled every available space. The smell alone should have made the day feel comforting. Instead, I found myself studying Margaret from across the table. She appeared completely relaxed. She laughed at jokes, complimented recipes, asked people about their plans for the new year. If she felt any embarrassment about what had happened earlier, she hid it remarkably well. At one point, my sister-in-law Karen leaned toward me. "The cookies you brought are amazing." I thanked her. Then she hesitated. For a second, it looked like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she looked down at her plate. That brief moment caught my attention. It was not the only one. Throughout lunch, I noticed several relatives glancing toward me and then quickly looking away. The pattern repeated often enough that I could not ignore it. They had noticed. Maybe not everyone, but enough people had noticed. The realization somehow made the situation worse. If nobody realized what happened, perhaps it could have been dismissed as an accident. But if multiple people saw it and remained silent, then the omission had become part of the room itself, an uncomfortable fact everyone was trying not to acknowledge. After lunch, guests scattered throughout the house. Some watched football in the family room. Others gathered around the fireplace. Children disappeared upstairs to play with new gifts. I stepped into the kitchen to help clean dishes. The quiet felt welcome after spending hours pretending everything was normal. As I rinsed plates at the sink, Margaret entered the room. For a moment we were alone. She opened the refrigerator, removed a container, and placed it on the counter. Neither of us spoke immediately. Then she glanced at me and smiled. "Everything all right?" The question surprised me. Not because she asked it, because she sounded sincere. I set down a plate and looked at her. Why would something be wrong? Margaret shrugged lightly. "You seem quieter than usual." For several seconds I considered answering honestly. I considered asking the question that had been sitting in my chest all day. Why was I the only person without a gift? Instead, I simply smiled. "I am fine." Margaret nodded. "Good." Then she returned to arranging leftovers as though nothing unusual had happened. That conversation bothered me more than the missing gift itself. Because if she genuinely forgot me, this was the perfect opportunity to realize it. The perfect opportunity to apologize. The perfect opportunity to correct a mistake. Instead, she acted as though no mistake existed. Later that afternoon, while people gathered in the living room again, Lily quietly sat beside me on the couch. She lowered her voice. "Mom." "Yes." She glanced around the room before speaking. "Did Grandma forget your present?" I forced a small smile. "Maybe." Lily frowned. "Grandma does not forget things." The certainty in her voice startled me. I looked at my daughter carefully. She was not angry. She was thinking, observing, connecting details, the same way she always did when something felt wrong. "Maybe it was an accident," I said. Lily shook her head slowly. No, her eyes drifted toward her grandmother across the room. "I do not think it was." Then she added something that made my stomach tighten. "And I think this is not the first time she has done something like this." Lily's comment followed me all the way home that evening. The roads were quiet beneath a fresh layer of snow. Christmas lights glowed from houses throughout the neighborhood. Families were finishing holiday dinners, watching movies together, and enjoying the kind of evening that was supposed to feel peaceful. Inside our car, however, a different atmosphere lingered. David drove while holiday music played softly through the speakers. Lily sat in the back seat looking out the window. Nobody said much. The silence was not angry. It was thoughtful. The kind of silence that appears when people are reconsidering things they once accepted without question. After we arrived home and carried gifts inside, Lily disappeared upstairs. David began organizing boxes and wrapping paper near the tree. I stood by the living room window watching snow fall beneath the streetlights. Finally, David spoke. "I am sorry about today." His voice was quiet. I turned toward him. "For what?" He hesitated. "For the gift situation." Hearing him acknowledge it out loud somehow made it feel more real. "You noticed." David gave me a look that almost made me laugh. "Emily, everyone noticed." That answer surprised me. Not because he noticed, because he believed everyone else had too. "Then why did nobody say anything?" I asked. David sighed heavily. "Probably for the same reason I did not." "Which is?" He looked down at the floor. Nobody wanted Christmas to turn into an argument. I understood that. In many families, maintaining peace becomes more important than addressing uncomfortable truths. The problem is that silence often protects the wrong person. Later that night, after David went to bed, I sat alone in the living room beside our Christmas tree. The colorful lights reflected softly across the room. Wrapped presents from friends and neighbors sat beneath the branches. Looking at them brought back memories of previous holidays. One memory led to another, then another. Gradually, a pattern began emerging. A pattern I had spent years ignoring. 3 Christmases earlier, Margaret had organized custom family ornaments with everyone's names engraved on them. Everyone except me. At the time, she claimed the company accidentally omitted one ornament. 2 years before that, she created a family photo calendar featuring every immediate family member. I appeared in exactly one picture. Everyone else appeared multiple times. She explained it by saying those were simply the photos she happened to have available. Last Thanksgiving, she handed out handwritten notes expressing gratitude to family members around the dinner table. She thanked David for being a wonderful son, Lily for being a wonderful granddaughter. Even several cousins received personal messages. I received a generic holiday card with no note inside. Each incident seemed small on its own, forgettable, easy to excuse, easy to explain away. But sitting there alone beside the tree, I realized something unsettling. The pattern only worked because every individual event appeared minor. No single moment felt important enough to challenge. Together, however, they painted a very different picture. The next morning, Lily came downstairs carrying a box. "I found something," she announced. She placed the box on the kitchen table. "What is it?" I asked. "Old Christmas stuff." We opened it together. Inside were ornaments, holiday cards, photographs, and decorations collected over many years. Lily began sorting through everything. "Look." She handed me one of the engraved ornaments from 3 years earlier. My name was missing. Then, she found the photo calendar. The same imbalance appeared again. One by one, she uncovered examples I barely remembered. "I thought these were accidents," Lily said. "So did I." She looked up at me. "But how many accidents can one person have?" The question lingered between us. Neither of us answered because neither of us needed to. A few minutes later, Lily pulled a folded piece of paper from the bottom of the box. "What is this?" she asked. The paper looked older than everything else. A shopping list written in Margaret's distinctive handwriting. At first glance it seemed ordinary. Holiday groceries, decorations, gift ideas. Then Lily's finger stopped beside a section labeled Christmas gifts. Names filled the list. Family members, relatives, friends. Every name had notes written beside it describing gift ideas and budgets. I immediately noticed something strange. My name was nowhere on the page. Lily stared at the list. Then she slowly turned it over. On the back was another note written in the same handwriting. Only 6 words. 6 words that instantly changed how I viewed everything. Remember who is really family. The 6 words lingered in the kitchen long after Lily finished reading them aloud. Remember who is really family. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Snow drifted past the window outside while the coffee maker hummed softly on the counter. It should have been an ordinary winter morning. Instead, it felt like we had stumbled across something we were never meant to see. Lily carefully turned the paper over again and examined the handwriting. This is Grandma's writing. It was not a question. It was a fact. I nodded slowly. I had seen Margaret's handwriting for nearly 2 decades. Birthday cards, holiday notes, grocery lists left on the kitchen counter. There was no doubt. The words belonged to her. What I did not know was when she had written them or why. David entered the kitchen a few minutes later carrying a cup of coffee. When he saw the expressions on our faces, he immediately sensed something was wrong. What happened? Lily handed him the paper. He read the shopping list first. Then he flipped it over. The moment he saw the note, his expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to know he understood exactly why we were disturbed. Where did you find this? He asked quietly. In the Christmas box, Lily answered. David stared at the note again. Then he sat down heavily at the table. For a long time nobody spoke. Finally he rubbed his forehead. Maybe it means something else. Lily frowned. Like what? David opened his mouth and then closed it again. The problem was obvious. There was no reasonable explanation. Not one that fit comfortably anyway. Because combined with everything else, the message felt less like an innocent reminder and more like a glimpse into Margaret's private thinking. The rest of the day passed slowly. We packed away wrapping paper, organized gifts, and tried to return to normal routines. Yet every conversation seemed to circle back to the same question. Had Margaret intentionally excluded me all these years? Or had we simply become too sensitive after Christmas morning? By evening, I found myself standing in the laundry room folding towels when Lily appeared in the doorway. Can I show you something? She asked. I followed her upstairs to her bedroom. She sat on the floor beside her desk and opened her laptop. I was looking through old photos, she explained. And then I remembered something. She clicked through several folders before opening one labeled Family Christmas. Hundreds of photographs filled the screen. Images from years of holiday gatherings. Birthday parties, Thanksgiving dinners, family reunions. At first, I did not understand what she wanted me to see. Then she started scrolling. Look at where everyone is standing. I leaned closer. In photo after photo, Margaret stood beside David, beside Lily, beside other relatives. Whenever group photos included me, I was usually positioned near the edge. Sometimes partially blocked. Sometimes cropped awkwardly. Sometimes missing entirely. That could be coincidence, I said, although my voice lacked conviction. Lily opened another folder. Then another. The pattern continued. Not every photograph. Not every event. Just enough to feel familiar. Just enough to make me uncomfortable. Mom, Lily said. Quietly. I do not think Grandma sees you as part of the family. Hearing the words spoken aloud hurt more than I expected. Not because they were new. Because they finally matched something I had felt for years but never wanted to admit. That night I could not sleep. Around midnight, I went downstairs and sat in the living room beside the Christmas tree. Most of the lights in the house were off. The colorful glow from the tree reflected across the quiet room. I found myself thinking about all the effort I had invested over 17 years. Birthday cakes, school events, holiday meals, family traditions. I had spent so much energy trying to belong that I never stopped to ask whether belonging was something Margaret would ever allow. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. David entered the room wearing sweatpants and carrying a blanket. He sat beside me without speaking. After several moments, he looked toward the tree and sighed. I think Lily is right. The words settled heavily between us. About what? I asked even though I already knew the answer. David stared at the lights. About my mother. He paused. And about the way she sees you. For the first time since Christmas morning, I felt something shift. Not in Margaret. In David. Because after years of excuses, explanations, and uncomfortable silence, my husband was finally beginning to see what had been sitting in front of us all along. The conversation with David changed something inside our home. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But enough that I could feel it. For the first time in years, I was no longer the only person noticing the pattern. Lily saw it. David saw it. And once people begin seeing something clearly, it becomes much harder to pretend it does not exist. The days after Christmas passed quietly. Snow remained piled along sidewalks and driveways. Holiday decorations still glowed from neighboring houses. Most families were enjoying the peaceful stretch between Christmas and New Year's Day. Our family appeared normal from the outside. Inside, however, we were reevaluating nearly 2 decades of memories. 3 days after Christmas, David came home carrying several storage boxes from the garage. "I thought we should finish organizing the holiday stuff," he said. Lily immediately volunteered to help. By late afternoon, the 3 of us sat in the living room surrounded by old decorations, photo albums, and holiday keepsakes. First, the project felt ordinary. Then Lily opened another box. "More Christmas lists," she announced. She handed a small stack of folded papers to David. Most contained shopping reminders and decoration inventories. Nothing unusual. Then one page caught his attention. "Wait." His voice immediately changed. Lily and I looked up. David unfolded the paper completely and stared at it for several seconds before passing it to me. Across the top, written in Margaret's familiar handwriting, were the words Christmas budget. Beneath it was a carefully organized list of names, family members, friends, neighbors. Beside each name was a dollar amount and a gift description. Margaret had apparently planned every purchase months in advance. I scanned the page slowly. My father-in-law was listed. David was listed. Lily was listed. Cousins, aunts, uncles. Even Karen's new boyfriend appeared on the list. My name did not. I checked again. Then a third time. Nothing. Not because Margaret forgot to add me. Because she had never included me in the first place. "What year is this from?" I asked. David pointed toward the corner. "This year." The date confirmed it. The omission had been intentional from the beginning. There had never been a forgotten package. There had never been a misplaced gift. The explanation Margaret silently allowed everyone to believe was never true. Lily leaned closer. "There is more on the back." I flipped the page over. Several additional notes filled the reverse side. Most were harmless reminders about wrapping supplies and holiday recipes. Then I noticed a short section near the bottom. Immediate family priority. Underneath were several names. David, Lily, Margaret's husband, other blood relatives. Again, my name was absent. Nobody spoke for a moment. The room felt strangely quiet despite the television playing softly in the background. Finally, David broke the silence. "I cannot defend this." The statement carried more weight than he probably realized. For years, he had searched for explanations whenever uncomfortable situations involved his mother. Not because he wanted to hurt me, because accepting the alternative felt too painful. Now even he could no longer explain it away. Later that evening, Karen called. She and David spoke frequently, and apparently he had mentioned some of what we discovered. After a brief conversation with him, she asked to speak with me. "Emily," she said carefully, "there is something I probably should have told you years ago." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" Karen hesitated. "A few Christmases back, Mom asked me for gift suggestions." I listened quietly. She mentioned everyone in the family one by one. Karen paused. "When I suggested something for you, she said she had already decided not to buy anything." The room suddenly felt smaller. "What exactly did she say?" Another pause. "She said gifts were for family." I closed my eyes. Not because the statement surprised me, because it confirmed what the evidence had been pointing toward all week. Karen sounded genuinely upset. I thought she was joking at the time. I wish I had questioned it more. "It is not your fault," I said softly, and I meant it. The responsibility belonged to Margaret, not the people who failed to recognize the pattern immediately. After the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. Outside, snow continued falling beneath the streetlights. Inside, the truth felt impossible to ignore now. The shopping list, the budget, the old note, Karen's memory, separate pieces that all pointed toward the same conclusion. Margaret had not forgotten me. She had excluded me, deliberately, repeatedly. For years. The difference was that this Christmas someone finally noticed. And as New Year's Day approached, Lily seemed more determined than ever. Because unlike the adults around her, she no longer seemed interested in protecting an uncomfortable peace. She wanted answers. And something told me she was about to find them. The final days of December arrived wrapped in gray skies and steady snowfall. Most families were preparing for New Year's celebrations. Ours was preparing for something else entirely. Not a confrontation. Not an argument. Something closer to clarity. Lily spent more time thinking than speaking. Every day she seemed to notice another detail from Christmas morning that no longer made sense. One afternoon, I found her sitting at the kitchen table staring at her phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked up. "Remember when Grandma said she forgot your gift?" My stomach tightened slightly. "Yes." Lily turned the screen toward me. "She never actually said that." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Lily opened a group chat containing messages exchanged among family members after Christmas. Relatives had shared photos, thanked each other for gifts, and discussed holiday plans. Then Lily pointed to one particular message from Margaret. "Thank you all for enjoying the gifts. I spent months planning everything." I read the sentence twice. Months planning everything. Not most things. Not nearly everything. Everything. The wording immediately caught my attention. "Interesting," I said quietly. Lily nodded. If she planned everything, then how did she accidentally forget only one person? The question hung in the air. The answer seemed obvious now. Later that evening, another piece of the puzzle appeared unexpectedly. Margaret called the house. David answered while Lily and I sat nearby. At first, the conversation sounded normal. Holiday leftovers. Weather forecasts. New Year's dinner plans. Then Margaret mentioned a gathering she was hosting on January 2nd. "Everyone will be there," she said. David glanced toward me. "Everyone." Margaret laughed softly. "Of course. Family should start the new year together." Something about the word family felt different after everything we had discovered. After the call ended, Lily remained unusually quiet. Finally she spoke. "I want to go." David looked surprised. "To Grandma's dinner?" "Yes." Her answer came immediately. "There is something I need to know." "What?" I asked. Lily hesitated. Whether she actually believes what she is doing. The question lingered in my mind for the rest of the evening, because until that moment I had focused entirely on actions. The missing gift, the list, the notes, the exclusions. I had never seriously considered what Margaret told herself about those choices. Did she truly view me as an outsider? Or had she convinced herself that her behavior was reasonable? On New Year's Eve, Lily received an unexpected answer. Margaret invited her over for lunch. Just the two of them. Normally Lily would have been excited. This time she seemed cautious. "You do not have to go," I told her. Lily shook her head. "I want to." A few hours later she left. The house felt strangely quiet after she was gone. David spent the afternoon watching football, while I attempted to organize holiday decorations. Neither activity distracted us for long. We were both waiting. Lily returned shortly after 4 o'clock. The moment she walked through the front door, I knew something had happened. Not because she looked upset, because she looked disappointed. Deeply disappointed. She placed her coat on a chair and sat at the kitchen table. David muted the television immediately. "What happened?" he asked. Lily took a slow breath. "I asked Grandma why Mom did not get a Christmas gift." Silence filled the room. "And?" David pressed gently. Lily looked down at her hands. At first she laughed. My chest tightened. "Then what?" "Then she said gifts are different when people marry into a family." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The sentence seemed to absorb all the air in the room. Finally Lily continued. "I asked her whether Mom was family." Tears filled her eyes, though she fought hard to keep them back. "Grandma said some people are family by blood, and some people are family by circumstance." David stared at the table. I looked toward the window. Snow drifted quietly beyond the glass. After everything we had found, I should have felt validated. Instead I felt sad. Not for myself. For Lily. Because she had just heard something that shattered the image she held of her grandmother. Lily wiped at her eyes and took another breath. I asked if she realized how much that would hurt Mom. She paused. And she said I was too young to understand family dynamics. The room became completely silent. Then Lily looked directly at me. For the first time since Christmas morning, there was no uncertainty left in her expression. She meant it, Mom. Her voice was calm now. Certain. Every bit of it. She meant it. New Year's Day arrived with clear skies and a thin layer of snow sparkling across the neighborhood. Most people spent the holiday making resolutions or recovering from late-night celebrations. Our family spent it quietly. The conversation Lily had with Margaret continued echoing through the house. Not because we discussed it constantly, because nobody knew exactly what to do with it. Once the truth becomes impossible to deny, it changes the shape of every future conversation. David seemed especially affected. He spent much of the morning sitting in the living room staring out the window. Several times I caught him picking up his phone and then putting it back down. He looked like a man wrestling with a decision he had postponed for years. Around noon he finally spoke. I think I need to talk to my mother. Lily immediately looked up from the book she was reading. About what? David gave a small humorless laugh. I think you know exactly about what. Nobody argued. Nobody tried to stop him. Because deep down all three of us understood something important. The issue was no longer the missing gift. The issue was what the missing gift represented. That afternoon, David drove to Margaret's house alone. The hours that followed felt unusually long. I tried reading, cleaning, organizing paperwork. Nothing held my attention for more than a few minutes. Lily seemed equally distracted. Every now and then, she glanced toward the driveway as though expecting answers to arrive with the sound of a car engine. David returned shortly before 5 o'clock. The moment he walked through the door, I knew the conversation had not gone the way he hoped. He looked exhausted. Not angry. Not frustrated. Just exhausted. He removed his coat slowly and sat at the kitchen table. How did it go? I asked gently. David stared at the tabletop for several seconds before answering. She does not think she did anything wrong. Lily lowered her eyes. Somehow that answer hurt more than if Margaret had become defensive. What did she say? I asked. David exhaled heavily. She said gifts are personal choices. She said nobody is entitled to them. Technically the statement was true. But all of us knew it avoided the real issue entirely. Then I asked why she excluded only one person. David paused. She said she was being honest about who she considers immediate family. Silence filled the room. The same belief. The same explanation. No misunderstanding. No confusión. Just certainty. David shook his head slowly. I asked whether she realized how painful that was. She told me people are too sensitive nowadays. Lily looked away. I could see the disappointment on her face again. Not disappointment in me. Not even disappointment in the situation. Disappointment in someone she had trusted. Later that evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, Lily suddenly spoke. I have an idea. David and I both looked at her. What kind of idea? Lily dried her hands with a towel and leaned against the counter. Grandma is hosting that family dinner on Saturday. Yes, David replied cautiously. I think we should go. The answer surprised both of us. Why? I asked. Lily hesitated only briefly. Because everyone deserves to hear the truth. My heart skipped slightly. What truth? Lily met my eyes. Not my version. Not Grandma's version. Her expression remained calm. The truth. Over the next few days she spent a surprising amount of time writing. Sometimes at the kitchen table. Sometimes in her room. Sometimes on the back porch while snow drifted across the yard. Whenever I asked what she was working on, she simply smiled and said, something important. Friday evening she finally showed us. It was a letter. Not a speech. Not an accusation. A letter. Several pages long. I sat beside David as Lily read it aloud. She wrote about family. About gratitude. About the people who show up every day without expecting recognition. She described the difference between belonging because of blood and belonging because of love. By the time she finished reading, the room was completely silent. David cleared his throat and looked away. I realized my eyes were full of tears. Lily, I whispered. This is beautiful. She smiled softly. Good. Then she folded the pages carefully and placed them back into an envelope. Because I planned to read it on Saturday. For the first time since Christmas morning, I felt something unexpected. Not fear. Not sadness. Anticipation. Because after weeks of silence, excuses, discoveries, and painful realizations, the story was finally moving toward a moment where nobody would need to argue. Nobody would need to accuse anyone of anything. The truth would simply be spoken aloud. And something told me that once it was, the entire room would never look at our family the same way again. Saturday evening arrived cold and clear. Fresh snow lined the edges of driveways throughout the neighborhood, and the sky glowed with the pale blue light that appears just before sunset. Margaret's annual New Year's family dinner had always been one of the most anticipated gatherings of the year. Relatives arrived carrying desserts, bottles of sparkling cider, and trays of food. From the outside, everything looked exactly as it always had. Warm lights filled the house. Laughter drifted from room to room. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread floated through the air. Yet beneath the familiar traditions, I could feel something different. Lily carried her envelope with her the entire evening. She never mentioned it, never drew attention to it. But I noticed. David noticed too. Around 6:30, everyone gathered around the long dining room table. More than 20 family members filled nearly every seat. Conversations bounced between holiday stories and plans for the coming year. Margaret sat near the center of the table, comfortable and confident as always. Looking around the room, I wondered how many people knew what had happened at Christmas. More importantly, I wondered how many had noticed but chosen silence. Dinner progressed normally for nearly an hour. Plates were passed. Glasses were refilled. Stories were shared. Then Margaret stood and lightly tapped her glass with a spoon. The room gradually quieted. Before dessert, she announced with a smile, I would like to thank everyone for being here. Family means everything to me. The irony nearly took my breath away. Around the table, people nodded politely. Margaret continued speaking about traditions, memories, and the importance of staying connected. It was the kind of speech she gave every year. Familiar. Polished. Comfortable. Then something unexpected happened. Before Margaret could sit down, Lily stood. The movement immediately caught everyone's attention. Actually, Lily said softly, there is something I would like to share too. Margaret looked surprised. So did most of the room. Lily rarely volunteered to speak in front of large groups. Of course, Margaret said after a brief pause. Go ahead. Lily unfolded the envelope and removed several pages. The room became completely quiet. This is something I wrote after Christmas, she began. Her voice was steady, calm, confident. It is about family. Nobody interrupted. Nobody moved. Every eye remained fixed on her. When I was younger, Lily continued, I thought family was something simple. I thought it was defined by names on a family tree, or by people sharing the same last name. She glanced down at her paper. As I got older, I realized family is much more than that. The room remained silent. Family is the person who helps with homework after a 10-hour workday. Family is the person who stays awake when you are sick. Family is the person who sacrifices things nobody else ever sees. My chest tightened. Across the table, several relatives exchanged glances. Lily continued reading. Family is not measured by biology alone. It is measured by love, by effort, by presence. Margaret's smile slowly faded. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. Lily lowered one page and picked up another. This Christmas taught me something important. Sometimes people decide who belongs and who does not. Sometimes they create categories. Immediate family. Extended family. Real family. The words hung heavily in the room. Nobody needed them explained. Several people immediately understood where she was going. But the truth is much simpler, Lily said. The people who love you every day are your family. I noticed Karen looking down at the table. My father-in-law stared quietly at his folded hands. Even David seemed emotional. Then Lily reached the final page. For 16 years, one person has shown me what family actually means. She never asked for recognition. She never demanded credit. She simply showed up every day. Tears blurred my vision. She taught me kindness, responsibility, perseverance. She made sacrifices I only fully understand now that I am older. Lily looked directly at me. My mother is the reason I know what family looks like. Complete silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind that appears when people are hearing something honest. Then Lily added one final sentence. And anyone who says she is not truly family does not understand the meaning of the word. The room froze. Nobody needed clarification. Nobody needed names. The truth had already arrived. Calmly, clearly, impossible to misunderstand. For several seconds no one spoke. Then somewhere near the far end of the table, a relative began clapping. The first clap was followed by another. Then another. Within seconds applause spread around the entire table. Not loud or dramatic. Genuine. The kind of applause that comes when people recognize a truth they should have acknowledged much sooner. I sat frozen in my chair, overwhelmed by emotions I could barely process. Lily lowered her pages and looked around the room. Her expression was calm. She had not spoken out of anger. She had not tried to embarrass anyone. She had simply told the truth. Across the table, David's eyes were shining with pride. Karen smiled through tears. Several relatives nodded quietly. Even my father-in-law looked emotional as he stared at Lily. For years I had imagined what it might feel like to finally be seen. I expected relief. Maybe satisfaction. Instead, what I felt most was gratitude. Gratitude that my daughter understood something many adults never learn. Gratitude that she had the courage to speak when everyone else chose silence. As the applause faded, the room remained unusually quiet. Nobody rushed to change the subject. Nobody pretended they had not understood the message. The truth was now sitting openly at the center of the table. Margaret remained seated. Her hands rested lightly in her lap. For the first time since I had known her, she looked uncertain. Not angry. Not defensive. Simply uncertain. The confidence that usually surrounded her seemed absent. Several long seconds passed before she finally spoke. That was a beautiful letter, Lily. Lily nodded politely. Thank you. Another silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. My father-in-law cleared his throat. I think she is right. Every head at the table turned toward him. He rarely involved himself in family disagreements. In fact, one of the reasons situations like this lasted so long was because he almost always stayed neutral. Yet now he looked directly at Margaret. Emily has been part of this family for 17 years. Nobody interrupted. She has supported all of us more times than I can count. He glanced toward me, including me. The room remained completely still. Karen spoke next. I agree. Then another relative. Then another. One by one, people shared small memories. Times I helped organize family gatherings. Times I supported relatives through difficult situations. Times I showed up when someone needed help. None of them were dramatic stories. That was what made them powerful. They were ordinary acts of care remembered by ordinary people. As each person spoke, I realized something remarkable. While I spent years trying to earn my place in the family, many family members had already accepted me long ago. The only person who never truly had was Margaret. And suddenly, her opinion no longer seemed nearly as important as I once believed. Eventually, all eyes settled on her. The room was not demanding an apology. Nobody appeared angry. They were simply waiting. Margaret looked around the table slowly. At her husband. At David. At Lily. Finally at me. For a moment I thought she might defend herself. Explain her actions. Offer another justification. Instead, her shoulders lowered slightly. Perhaps I have been holding on to certain ideas for too long. The admission was small. Careful. Imperfect. Yet it was more honesty than I had ever heard from her on this subject. Nobody responded immediately. There was no dramatic confrontation. No emotional outburst. Real life rarely provides those moments. Instead, something quieter happened. People began talking again. Conversations resumed. Dessert was served. Children laughed in the next room. The evening moved forward. Yet everything felt different. Not because every problem had been solved. Because the truth no longer needed to hide. Weeks later, after the holiday decorations had been packed away and life returned to normal, I found myself standing in the attic with Lily as we organized storage boxes. She held one of the old Christmas ornaments from years earlier, the one without my name. "Do you want to keep this?" she asked. I looked at it for several seconds before smiling. "Yes." She seemed surprised. "Why?" I carefully placed it into a storage container. "Because it reminds me of something." "What?" I looked at my daughter. "That belonging is not something another person gets to grant or take away." Lily smiled. "I like that." So did I. Because in the end, the greatest gift I received that holiday season was not wrapped beneath a tree. It was not purchased in a store. It did not come with a ribbon or a card. It came from a daughter brave enough to speak the truth and a family finally willing to hear it. Margaret may have spent years deciding who belonged, but she never actually had that power. The people who loved me had already made their decision long ago. I simply needed to see it for myself. And as I turned off the attic light and followed Lily downstairs, I realized something that would stay with me forever. Real family is not defined by blood alone. Real family is defined by the people who choose you again and again, even when they do not have to. And that was a gift nobody could ever take away.